dashur kolegë, bashkëpunëtor dhe pjesëmarrës, ju falenderoj shumë që jeni këtu sot dhe ju uroj mirëseardhje në javën e paqes 2024. Një moment me sfida botërore nga më të ndryshmet, kërcënime të reja sa vjen e më komplekse, si dhe lajme të shpeshta të rasteve të dhunës apo konfliktes, sidomos në mosha të reja, është e rëndësishme dhe udhës që të dedikojmë mendime, punë dhe kohë paqes. United Nations Association Albania, me mbështetjen e organizatës si motor nga Suedia, UN Association Sweden, si dhe Regional Youth Cooperation Office, për disa vitesh ka kënaqësinë të organizoj një javë të mbushur me aktivitete të dedikuara ndaj paqes, rinisë dhe ndërlidhjes së tyre. Unë e beson fort se të rinjt janë aktorë dinamik që krijojnë ndryshime sociale. Ata kanë potencialin të forcojnë narrativa pozitive mbi harmoninë, paqen dhe të luftojnë ndasitë. Si të tillë ne ndjejmë detyrën që të gjejmë format më të mira për të mbështetur ata në këtë potencial. Jemi mirënjohës bashkëpunimeve të frytshme mes shoqërisë civile, akademisë, institucioneve publike dhe organizatave ndërkombëtare, të cilat na kanë lejuar të bëjmë këto hapa pozitive. Pa dashur të marr shumë kohë, dëshiroj të ftoj zotin Armand Skapi, sekretari i përgjithshëm i Ministrisë për Europën dhe Punët e Jashtme, të ndajë me ne fjalën e tij. Faleminderit.
Ju falenderoj për ftesën për të marrë pjesë në këtë aktivitet kaq të rëndësishëm, kaq interesant, që lidhet me përfshirjen e rinisë në sfidat që lidhen me paqen dhe sigurinë. Rinia padyshim është pjesa më vitale e shoqërisë sonë. Pjesa nga e cila kanë lindur shumë iniciativa, zhvillime. Më larg se në datën 8 dhjetor ne përkujtuam ditën e rinisë, ditën që historinë e Shqipërisë shënoi kalimin përfundimisht nga një regjim totalitar, nga një diktaturë, në një shoqëri demokratike, dhe për këtë ne e rinisë, shoqëria shqiptare do të jetë gjithmonë mirënjohëse. Duke qenë një pjesë kaq vitale, rinia është dhe duhet jetë e përfshirë në gjithë zhvillimet e brendshme, politike, sociale, ekonomike, por një këndvështrim të veçantë rinia mund të ketë dhe në aspektin e ruajtjes së paqes, paqen ndërtimit, konsolidimit të institucioneve demokratike që lidhen gjithashtu me paqen, ndërmarrjen e iniciativave të cilat lidhe me edukimin e jo vetëm të brezit të ri, po dhe të shoqërisë shqiptare në tërësi, siç janë për shembull iniciativat për edukimin e të rinjve, për mënyrat e zgjidhjes së paqësore të mosmarrëveshjeve, jo vetëm në shoqërinë shqiptare, por edhe në shoqërinë e rajonit. Siç e dini, rajoni ynë është një rajon i cili ka prodhuar shumë histori, pavarësisht se rajoni i vogël, ka prodhuar aq shumë histori sa që jo vetëm Europa, por edhe Shtetet Bashkuara të Amerikës, edhe parë ndoshta organizatat ndërkombëtare si Kombet e Bashkuara ose BE-ja e Këshillit të Evropës janë marrë për gjatë, pikërisht sepse ka qenë një rajon jo aq i stabilizuar nga pikpamja politike dhe shoqërore. Por ajo që është pozitive është që ky rajon është tashmë i përfshirë në mënyrë të faktikisht në rrugën e integrimit evropian. Dhe Shqipëria si pjesë e këtij rajoni nuk ka mbetur pas për zhvillimeve, siç e dini, Shqipëria ka hapur si vjet negociatat për anëtarësinë në Bashkimin Evropian për klastrin e parë, janë ato themelorët, dhe që me besim të plotë që brenda këtij muaji do të hapim edhe negociatat për klastrin e dytë, që lidhet me politikën e jashtme, por dhe me çështjet e sigurisë, ku sigurisht rinia është plotësisht e përfshirë. Jo vetëm rinia shqiptare, po thash dhe rinia e rajonit. Një rol të rëndësishëm rinia ka dhe me edukimin e brezit brezit të rinjve, në aspektin e parandalimit të përfshirjes së këtij brezi në si themi në problematika të tilla si përfshirja në ekstremizmin e dhunshëm. faktikisht për shkak edhe të zhvillimeve që kanë ndodhur jo vetëm në rajonin tonë, por edhe në rajone të tjera të botës, siç është lindja e mesme, ka pasur raste, eksperienca ku fatkeqësisht dhe të rinj shqiptar janë përfshirë në aktivitetet e ekstremizmit të dhunshëm, të cilat kanë prodhuar absolutisht destabilitet dhe cënim të paqes jo vetëm në rajon, por edhe në vende të tjera të botës. Ne përmendëm linjën e mesme, por jo vetëm. Siç e dini, jemi në një rajon në një periudhë shumë të trazuar historike, ku bota është e mbarësur me konflikte ndërkombëtare. Kemi konfliktin lindjen e mesme, kemi agresionin e pajustifikuar të Rusisë ndaj Ukrainës, situata jo shumë të stabilizuar në disa vende të rajonit, që s'po e përmend, të cilat na kujtojnë që sa e brisht është paqja dhe stabiliteti në rajonin tonë dhe në vende të tjera të botës, ku rinia mund t'japi një kontribut mjaft të fuqishëm. Çfarë duhet bëjmë ne? Të paktën flas në aspektin e përfaqësuesit të institucioneve publike. Institucionet publike duhet të përfshihen gjithnjë më tepër të rinjt në hartimin e politikave, në hartimin e programeve, në ndërmarrjen e iniciativave, të cilat kanë si synim luajtjen e stabilitetit, paqëndërtimin, paqebërjen, parandalimin e konflikteve, zgjidhjen e mosmarrëveshjeve, të cilat në qoftë se nuk marrin trajtimin e duhur në origjinën e tyre, mund të eskalojnë deri në konflikte të armatosura, pasojat e cilëve nuk i mund t'i parashikojmë dhe t'i përballojmë në të ardhmen. Ministria e Jashtme sa i përket aktivitetit e saj ka mbështetur mjaft iniciativa rinore. Këtu do të përmend dy, sparje Rajkon, e cila është një organizat rinore, ku mbledh përfaqësuesit rinor nga 6 vendet e rajonit tonë. Dhe mund themi që është një iniciativë mjaft e mbështetur nga Shqipëria, sepse Rajko, kjo organizat rajonale, ka dhe selinë e saj në Shqipëri. Mbaj mend periudhën kur u negociua akti themeltar i kësaj organizate, ku ndërmjet përfaqësuesve të shteteve pati mjaft kontradikta, por të gjithë erdhën në një emërus përbashkët për të bashkuar të 6 vendet e rajonit, pavarësisht dallimeve politike ose në pikpamje nga më të ndryshmet. Bie fjala kemi Serbinë dhe Kosovën pjesë e kësaj organizate, sepse rinia pikërisht e mbështetur nga organizat mund të jap shumë për stabilitetin në rajonit tonë. Dhe fal këtij aktiviteti janë ndërmarrë shumë iniciativa, shumë programe, dhe kemi mjaft kënaqësi që Rajko po progreson vit pas viti me mbështetje dhe nga aktorë të tjerë ndërkombëtar. S'do të lë pa përmendur dhe organizatorët e këtij eventi sotëm, që është Shoqata Shqiptare e Kombeve Bashkuara, ku për më shumë se 6 vjet kjo organizat është mbështetur brenda mandatit tonë, brenda kuadrit tonë institucional, edhe nga Ministria për Ropën dhe Punët e Jashtme. Nëpërmjet delegatëve rinor, të cilët kanë marrë pjesë në delegacionet e zyrtare të qeverisë shqiptare në sesionet e Asamblesë Përgjithshme të Kombeve Bashkuara, ne kemi përçuar zërin të rive në pikërisht në familje më të madhe të kombeve, siç është ajo e Kombeve Bashkuara në New York, por pse jo, tashmë që Shqipëria është edhe antar i Këshillit të Drejtave të Njerëzit, pse jo të rinj shqiptar përfaqësues të kësaj shoqate të përfshihen në aktivitetin ku të drejtat e njerëzit janë mjaft të ndërlidhura edhe me çështjet e sigurisë. Ne vim nga eksperiencë mjaft e rëndësishme dhe unike, siç ishte ajo e antarësimit për 2 vjet si antar i përhershëm në Këshillin e Sigurimit, ku kemi organizuar si Shqipëri 2 evente dhe me pjesëmarrje dhe me angazhimin e shoqatës shqiptare të Kombeve Bashkuara. pikërisht kuadrin e agjendës paqja dhe siguria, e cila është një agjendë mjaft e rëndësishme e Kombeve Bashkuara, ku i ka parë rinin të rit në përgjithësi si pjesë vitale të gjithë iniciativave të Kombeve Bashkuara për promovuar paqen, stabilitetin dhe sigurinë globale. Siç e përmenda, Shqipëria është para shumë sfidave, dhe sfida më e rëndësishme në kuadrin e politikës jashtme, po pse jo dhe të sigurisë, është ajo e integrimit në Bashkimin Evropian. Qeveria shqiptare ka vendosur një objektiv, besojmë të arritshëm, antarësimin brenda vitit 2030 në familjen e madhe europiane, për cilën kemi aspiruar që në dhjetorin e vitit 90, dhe ku sigurisht rinia, të rinjtë tanë, mund të luajnë një rol mjaft të pakrahasueshëm me pjesën tjetër të shoqërisë, sepse është pjesa e driving force e shoqërisë shqiptare, e cila do të mbush nesër institucionet shqiptare, po pse jo dhe institucionet e strukturat e Bashkimit Evropian. Kështu që ne jo më larg se para disa ditësh bëmë edhe një thirrje publike për përfshirjen e ekspertëve shqiptar, të cilët mund të jenë të ri, në misionin ton në Bruksel, sepse do të jetë interlokutori kryesor i marrëdhënieve të qeverisë shqiptare me institucionet e Bashkimit Evropian, pikërisht në këtë fazë të rëndësishme të integrimit evropian, siç është ajo e negociatave fillimisht dhe pastaj e antarësimit me të drejta të plota. Kështu që pa dashur zgjatëm shumë, duhet të urojmë gjithëve sukses dhe sa më tepër përfshirje si në këto iniciativa që promovojnë rolin e rinisë në paqen dhe stabilitetin, jo vetëm në Shqipëri, por edhe në rajon, dhe përfshirje sa më të madhe tuaj në iniciativat e lançuara nga qeveria, por edhe në bërjen pjesë tuaj në strukturat e institucioneve shqiptare, sepse pikërisht jeni ju ata të cilët do të çonin përpara shoqërinë dhe Shqipërinë në sfidat e reja rajonale, globale e më gjërë. Faleminderit dhe suksese.
Faleminderit shumë zoti Skapi, jemi shumë mirënjohës për mbështetjen tuaj të vazhdueshme dhe urojmë që ta kemi gjithnjë. Duke qenë se panelet do zhvillohen në anglisht, mendoj që mund të jetë udhës ta vijojmë diskutimin tonë në anglisht. United Nations Association Albania has pioneered the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda in Albania, but also in the region. It has been a valuable undertaking, without a doubt, but it has also been a very challenging one that needs to be recognized as such in order for us to be able to move forward. I've had the pleasure of closely following up the way that Peace Week and the YPS project has expanded over the past 2 years. How we've expanded this portfolio from the topics that we've covered, new and exciting ones every year, from the people that we've reached, participants and youth alike, and the partnerships that we've established. I have the pleasure of inviting now the President of the UN Association Albania, Mr. Chris Ticina, to share a bit more about the tireless work that we've done over the past few years and the vision for the future. Thank you.
Dear Mr. Skapi, dear colleagues from RICO and UNA Sweden, distinguished guest speakers, fellow participants, good morning and welcome to the third consecutive edition of Peace Week Albania. I must admit that I've often heard that the opening remarks of the organizers of a conference feel sometimes as the least anticipated part of the event. It's like the broccoli before the dessert. Essential, maybe, but not what everyone is waiting for. But fear not, I will try to be easy on the ears and also walk you through the menu that we have prepared for everyone during this week. As we kick off Peace Week 2024, I invite you to take a moment to realize that today, the 10th of December, is also International Human Rights Day. There's a powerful connection here between the UN Youth, Peace and Security Agenda and human rights, as both emphasize the importance of dignity, empowerment, and participation. Human rights and peace building go hand in hand. They are the foundations on which we build our societies. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is the purpose of Peace Week? Encouraged by examples abroad, this idea was piloted by UN Association Albania in 2022 with one clear goal in mind: to bring together annually various initiatives and stakeholders that are committed to working on the YPS agenda through diverse lenses, locally, nationally, regionally, and also globally. We believe that collaboration is essential in addressing the complex challenges that we face, especially those that impact our youth. For this edition of Peace Week, we were focused on an important and timely theme: the future of the YPS agenda in the Western Balkans and beyond. Our inspiration came from recent events and the deliberations on the new agenda on peace discussed during the Summit of the Future in September in New York, the third report of the UN Secretary General on the implementation of the YPS agenda, and the fact that we are approaching the 10th anniversary of the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 2250. These elements convince us that Peace Week 2024 should be forward-looking, while based on a deep reflections on the work done so far. This edition has been conceived as a temporal and thematic journey, with each day of the week focusing on one of the 5 pillars of the YPS agenda, and each discussion setting the ground for the next deliberations. We will take stock of what has happened with the implementation of the agenda, explore examples of do's and don'ts, and try to chart a new course. Thus, this morning's opening panel on the status of the global level will be followed by a discussion this afternoon on the progress in the Western Balkans region. Tomorrow, discussions will move on to the role of education in building peace activism, bringing examples from non-formal education, high school curricula, the involvement of academia, and also grassroots initiatives. On Thursday, we will dwell into deliberations concerning the use of artificial intelligence and technology for the benefit of peace and security. And finally, we will host a meetup of stakeholders in Albania that are working on the localization on this important agenda. So we have 18 exceptional speakers joining us from Albania, Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, Egypt, the United Kingdom, and the USA. So whether you're joining us in person or you're joining us online, we are thrilled to have you with us. I'd also like to take a moment to express our gratitude to the UN Association of Sweden for their support in making this event possible. This partnership helps us enhance our efforts under the project Sustainable Communities Made of Us, and has enabled us to foster synergies, coordinate ideas, and increase momentum for the progress of the YPS agenda in Albania. Moreover, I would like to express my gratitude and thank Rajko, who has joined us in organizing this edition and whose approach of supporting local ownership of the YPS interventions in the Western Balkans is crucial. As we move forward, I invite each one of you, be it online or on-site, to contribute actively to our discussions. Your insights, experiences, ideas are what will drive this initiative forward. This week is not just about listening or talking. It's about participating, sharing, and building a collective vision for the future. In closing, I'd like to share a thought that resonates with the theme. Peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. Let's work together to ensure that actions we take this week reflect our commitment to a more peaceful and just world for everyone. Thank you, and let's make Peace Week a meaningful experience for all.
Thank you, Mr. China. Echoing your words, I am sure that Peace Week would not be possible without the support and collaboration of dear partners who share the same goal and the same vision. And it is without a doubt that Rajko is one of such actors who has been a key player in the localization of the YPS agenda from the very beginning. And I would kindly invite Mr. Krishnik Loka, who is head of the local branch office Albania of Rajko, to share his word with us.
Thank you very much, Christel. Good morning to everyone, to our distinguished guests, to our young people. Thank you for coming today. I've been noted recently that every time I speak officially, I tend not to smile. So I want to start by saying that it's not you, it's me, because I'm very, very happy to be here, and it is my great pleasure to actually welcome you all to the third edition of the Peace Week. And on that, I am proud that, as Christy said, it is the third edition, and UNA deserves its recognition for it, because in a very, I would say, challenging environment now for civil society, and especially for youth organizations within the civil society, to have sustainability seems always harder and harder. So it is great that we are gathering for 3 years to celebrate peace, but not only to celebrate, but to actually put those important notes for every year, what we have to do when it comes to peace and to YPS agenda. But definitely being here for 3 years in a row, it means that there is hard work, there is dedication, and most importantly, there is a big trust on young people. For young people to lead initiatives, apologies, for young people to lead initiatives. And actually, youth-led initiatives are the key to the heart of Peace Week, but also are the key to the heart of the YPS agenda, which puts young people in the center stage. And here it is our role as organizations working with young people to actually help young people reach this position. On that regard, I very proudly would like to share a few of the initiatives that RICO has taken when it comes to supporting not only the YPS agenda, but also peace-building efforts in general. Because it is in the core of our business to support peace-building. And in our 8 years of work, we have allocated more than 10 million euros when it comes to regional projects focusing on peace building, intercultural learning and dialogue, youth participation, youth empowerment, social entrepreneurship seen through a regional lens. We have managed to support more than 100 regional projects. We have managed to support more than 130 high school exchanges in the region. For all of them to actually come and bring one of the most important results, which is having more than 25,000 young people from the Western Balkans traveling, meeting face-to-face, and together discussing about peace. When it comes to YPS, we've been more focusing our efforts towards this agenda in the last, I would say, 3 years, and especially through our very important project called the Recognized, which is supported by some of our closest friends, which is the German government through the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And through this project, we have actually set up our approach to the YPS agenda. As Christy mentioned, on a local level, we do not want to impose any type of agenda. We think that it comes from the context. It should come from the sector to actually say, this is what we need, this is what we have to get. And for that, we have entrusted our colleagues and friends from the National Youth Councils from across the region as the best entity to actually mention and to say what is the best, what is in the best interest of young people when it comes to the YPS agenda, and how to be in the and how to build an architecture when it comes to the YPS. And the NYCs, together with their partners, have managed to bring every year different ideas which are necessary for their context to be developed. When it comes to Albania, last year we supported again UNA through organizing 3 local workshops with young people on the topic of YPS. We supported one YPS meetup to bring together civil society organizations to discuss on the topic, but also with a side with the training on the YPS agenda. This year we are continuing, and this year they asked and we delivered, and what they asked this year and what they thought it was important to do was for the National Youth Congress to actually conduct a policy paper, actually 2 policy papers, one of them being on the AI impact on security and the other one on the perception of civil society on YPS. We really look forward to see the results of these policy papers and to be in that library, on that knowledge hub that also RICO is preparing and supporting, which you can all also find in our website. Additionally, quite clear, we're also supporting the Peace Week, which is giving the opportunity to everyone to participate, being in physical or online setting, to discuss about the agenda of YPS on a global, regional, but of course also on a local level. For the meetup, I won't say anything more. Everybody who has been invited, we look forward to them participating and to jointly analyze what has been done in the last 3 years or 2 years in Albania, and to see what are the steps to move forward in 2025. There are 2 more initiatives, without taking much of your time, that I think are important to mention. Only on Saturday, we actually closed the first RICO YPS Academy, which brought together representatives from governmental institutions from the Western Balkans. And here I would like to mention that we had representatives from Ministries of Education, Ministries of Justice, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministries of Youth, and they were accompanied by international organizations such as Western Balkan Fund, Regional Anti-Corruption Initiative, and RESPA. This is pivot activity because for the first time we are extending our network of collaborators when it comes to the YPS agenda and bringing the attention not only to those working with young people, but everyone who actually works in policy making, which is relevant to young people, to join in this important initiative of putting young people in the center stage of the YPS. As I like to say, young people should not be some isolated island floating somewhere in the sea where we try to make some policy for them, but young people should actually be the passengers who are traveling in every island, who are part of the mainland, and in that we see youth lens in every policy that we do, which is relevant for young people. Also for them who participated in the academy, it was a transformative journey to actually see what they do and how this translates in policies for young people. And we are glad that after 3 full working days, they went back home actually energized and understanding more clearly what their role can be when it comes to their support on youth, peace, and security. Lastly, we have initiated this year one very interesting I would say still a concept, which is the concept of a peace capital. This goes in line with the initiative of examples like European Youth Capital or European Capital for Culture. We would like to bring something for peace, to localize peace, to promote peace policy in different cities of the Western Balkans. And for that, it's still on a consultation process. Some of you maybe already participated in some of them. Some of you will receive an invitation soon to actually all together come up with a methodology and a concept on how the peace capital should look like and how the peace capital should reflect the needs of our young people and the needs for having a sustainable peace. It was very well said by Christy, when it comes to peace, unfortunately, we take it for granted. And especially in the times that we are living now, peace is in a very fragile state. And the Western Balkans do reflect, unfortunately, quite easily if there is fragility in European Union, if there is fragility in the world. So it is up to every one of us to be remembered that peace is not a destination, reconciliation is not a destination. We work every day in a peaceful way to keep peace. And for that, to close my intervention, I would like to thank again every organization, including UNA and the National Youth Congress, for working every day when it comes to peace efforts. And I would like to thank every young person who every day takes even a small gesture of courage by reaching out to a stranger or fighting every day for their rights. When it comes to peace, everything matters. And I hope that also what we are doing today is directly contributing to our peace efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loka, for highlighting the need to have not only youth-inclusive policies, but a youth-inclusive mindset, and to approach them not from a standpoint that differentiates them, but from one that includes them as something that's organic and part of our society and a need for us to proceed forward in the right direction. We're also very happy that this year we have the chance to have our dear partners from UNA Sweden join us physically here. And we've had the pleasure of working with UNA Sweden on a number of projects for a few years now. And I would really like to invite Ms. Pearl Mulkerins, the International Project Manager, to share her words with us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Crystal, for the wonderful words. As Christy has said wisely, I will try not to be the broccoli before the dessert and keep myself short and sweet. But good morning. My name is Pearl Mulkerins, and I'm working with our international programs at UNA Sweden. And I'm here today together with Eva Rundgren Forsberg, my colleague in the IP program. It's wonderful to be here today to actually take part of and to see the wonderful YPS event and the Peace Week. As Crystal mentioned earlier, we've had an ongoing partnership with UNA Albania since 2022. And this is actually a part of a program, Sustainable Development through Civil Society Action, which was programmed to take place between 2023 and 2027, together also with UNA Armenia, Georgia, and Tanzania. And here our aspect was to work with human rights and democracy and sustainable development. And so it's been wonderful and vital to have the work of UNA Albania in this program with your focus and perspective on youth. I think it was a wonderful point that was raised earlier, that the youth really are the future working with these topics, so it's so important. I learned earlier a little bit about the background of this building, so I think there's no better place to be really to talk about youth and democracy. So it's going to be wonderful to listen and to learn this week. And yes, we look forward to future collaboration. Unfortunately, this 4-year program is coming to an end a bit earlier as a result of changes in Swedish development cooperation. But we will keep our collaboration with UNA Albania, and we look forward to collaborating in the focus of youth and schools. I'll stop there, and thank you so much for having us. I look forward to this week.
Thank you, Ms. Mulkarins. Thank you for being here with us today, and thank you everyone for dealing with the broccoli. Now we can start with the dessert. I would like to now invite the panelists one by one and introduce them to you so we can proceed with the first panel of today. If we can maybe perhaps move this and move to the panel. So this first panel is titled The Youth, Peace and Security Agenda in the Global Scene. Where are we and where are we going? I think it's a fitting title because it highlights the need to reflect on the present and the steps you've taken up until this point before you can move forward and think about the future. And today we've tried to make a very inclusive panel to have different perspectives and insights from experts in the field, both from academia, civil society, international organizations, who have worked on youth mainstreaming, peace and security from different angles, whether it's through mediation, whether it's through research, or through producing guidelines and working with and for the youth directly. The first panelist that I'd like to invite is Michal Baumann, who is a peace practitioner specializing in inclusive peace and mediation. She is currently serving as program officer within the mediation program at Swiss Peace. Michal, if you join me, thank you very much. The second panelist is Milena Stosic, a senior consultant and expert in organizational development, strategic thinking, and youth and gender mainstreaming, with extensive experience supporting democratization, youth participation, and human rights in Serbia and in Eastern Europe. The other two panelists will be joining us online. Unfortunately, one of them could not join us due to some visa issues, and the other one was unable to travel to Tirana this time. If we can make sure that we have the connection online so we can see them. Lovely. So Yara Uda is currently serving as YPS Program Officer at the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building, or CCPA, where she drives the integration of the YPS agenda into regional and international frameworks. Thank you for being with us, Yara. Our fourth panelist is Dr. Claudia Seymour, who is an applied social researcher with more than 20 years of experience, specializing in youth protection, resilience to violence, and ethics of international engagement. Thank you, Dr. Seymour, if you have joined us.
Yes, I'm here. Thank
That's
you.
perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience. So I would like to get right to it, and we're going to put Milena on the spot first. Milena, when we talk about the YPS agenda, it seems like this big abstract concept, and especially if you haven't worked with it, you think it's just words on a long, long document. But could you help us understand in more practical terms, how can we understand the YPS agenda? How do we implement it? And because today the theme is participation, what is participation in this agenda?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me today and on this topic that is so close to my heart. And it's always a pleasure to be back to Tirana. Been here many times, but it's always really, really nice and feels good to be back. It's a big question. It's a big question. We were actually, as Kreshnik was saying at the beginning, unwrapping this. I was actually engaged in this YPS Academy of RAICO, so we've been talking about this very question throughout 3 modules. So bear with me if I'm short today in replying to this, but let's take a look back at where is this coming from. I mean, we don't have to call something YPS agenda or any sort of agenda in terms to acknowledge that a lot of things in terms of peace building, connectivity and youth participation has been done by many different actors, primarily youth civil society actors in the past when we speak about our region, but also in general worldwide. But the difference that it makes is to have something on paper in this way is to for the first time also globally and formally acknowledge that young people are a bit more than something to look after. In a sense, we have a lot of prejudices that we live day by day, not only here but throughout the globe, I would say in different but also similar ways, whereas we tend to put different groups of people in certain boxes and look at them in a one-dimensional manner, right? And this is only humane thing to do. In a sense, this is how we structure world, this is how we go through the world. However, for young people, this did not work so well because they were not explicitly seen as people with agency in the present moment. So what I would say is that YPS makes a difference for is to say young people are active citizens now, so they have right to full citizenship. When people say they are the presence, I think this is what we mean behind that we are not investing in some of their knowledge or treating them as future spoilers today in order to prevent some risk, especially when we speak about young men who were quite often seen, especially in the context of the also UN agenda that is about countering extremism and radicalization leading to terrorism, you know, as a group of people that needs to be contained somehow because they are risk. Or on another hand, to see young women as a group of people who needs to be protected because they are passive and they don't have agency in that sense. So what YPS agenda is saying, majority of young people are actually peaceful, not problematic, and they want to be active citizens. They want to be engaged, and they are requesting for this space one way or another. In many places we see that they actually don't wait for this space to be given, but they actively are searching for that. And in that sense, I would say also that enabling, formally speaking, through the big global agenda, this space and this acknowledgement, they have a role which is positive, that can contribute to peace and security, which is also a space traditionally held by certain stakeholders, very close space. I think this makes a difference, and it is fair to also acknowledge that this was enabled by the previous agenda, which is Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and to see that historically underrepresented or less represented groups of people who live and breathe in our societies, that they also should have a say. So speaking of participation, participation is the first pillar of the YPS agenda in these three resolutions. And what I like to say is that it's also a horizontal principle throughout. So we cannot focus on any other pillar of YPS, be it protection, prevention, or partnerships and whatnot, if we do not apply meaningful participation. This is in a way precondition to actually implement YPS agenda meaningfully. And what do I mean by this is not to be on the opposite of tokenization. So let's headcount some young people in this room and say, yes, we did something that is meaningful. There are prerequisites which are defining what is meaningful participation. They are not necessarily spelled out in the resolutions, but practitioners know, and throughout some other documents coming from UN, but also coming from bottom up, you know, from different grassroots youth organizations across the world, we can actually understand them in a similar manner. I like to refer back to the Laura Landi model, which I find to be quite simple, but yet super effective and very understandable also from the perspective of decision makers. Like, how do you know that you enabled proper participation of young people? I think this speaks very good about it, because first of all, you need to provide the space, which is not necessarily only the physical space, but the opportunity per se to contribute, to be heard, to get out from this invisibility, which is quite common to young people. For their voice to be heard, meaning for their opinions to reach the different audiences, and for this voice, for this opinion to be informed, I think intergenerational cooperation also matters so much. So it's not also about just saying, let's give the floor to different cohorts of young women and men and non-binary youth, and this is the king, but rather to have a cooperation, to have dialogue, to have also support from others that we call adults or decision makers or seniors or whatnot. And then also the audience, she says, matters a lot in a sense of who do you talk to? Are those people who are making any decisions? Is this conversation going to stay in this room, or actually has a chance to make a difference? And finally, the fourth element she speaks about when we speak about participation is influence, which in my experience, what different groups of young people usually tell me is most commonly missing. Because we do see a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives, whereas we gather young people, we speak together, we also write some smart recommendations, and then what happens? And this is the question of influence, that young people also want to understand what can go through, what was accepted and what not. And not only from the position of us and them, I think also what we need to underline is that young people can also be decision makers themselves, right? Although throughout the globe we see a super, super small percentage of young people being members of parliament or in any positions of decision makers, young women especially. So this influence part is something that also contains what we call meaningful participation, not necessarily taking on board everything that any group of young people brought, but to have this conversation, to have this dialogue, why this works, why this does not work, to have this feedback, and this is missing for the most part. So the hope with YPS agenda, I think it's far beyond the question how to make participation work in the context of conflict or conflict prevention or peacemaking or participation in peace agreements, which also matters a lot, but to acknowledge also what the peace means in this title, which is, I would assume we would agree it's far beyond absence of war, right? So we speak about positive peace, and that's why YPS agenda opens the doors also to say this is not reserved policy only for some countries out there. I mean, I'm always referring back to our region, but you know, the first country who implemented it on their own level is Finland, you know, so it's a country in European Union, it's not engaged in conflict and so on and so forth. So this agenda is also saying what matters also is to make questions about economy status, about employment, about how we use sports and culture to connect young people and to engage them, to produce this feeling of belonging, of meaning, of being an active citizen in a society. And in relation to this, of course, the security as such, in YPS, I believe it's more related to human security, so security of human beings and of all of diversity that exists among us, thus different needs and different realities that we might be living, and not only security of states, which is the traditional approach that we used to see when we speak about all of this. Sorry if I'm taking a bit of time. There is so much to be said about this.
Thank you so much, Milena, for giving a more holistic overview of what YPS is, but also how to understand peace in different contexts. I think it's a pitfall that we must be wary of, to take one concept and just import it into context that without contextualizing it. So thank you for that holistic approach. Michal, you also have very extensive expertise in promoting meaningful participation of marginalized groups, including youth, and you also work with mediation efforts in contexts like Syria and Afghanistan, who have suffered from deeply rooted conflicts and also have ongoing violence. Could you give us a more broader context of the global position of conflict and peace initiatives and how YPS fits into this?
Thanks a lot, Crystal, for the introduction. Also, thanks a lot for the introduction before. I hope we can live up to the expectation to be the part of the dessert in this Peace Week. Thank you very much for having us here and being on this panel with you, Milena, and colleagues on the screen. I also received a big question with putting a bit into perspective the global context on the YPS agenda, and especially when we look at peace processes and conflicts in today's world. So I first want to start with a rather positive note in terms of the progress that has been made in the last 9 years. Today is one day past the YPS resolution anniversary, the 9th anniversary. So next year will be a big year for the YPS agenda, where we hopefully are also able to really plug in some of the progress that has been made globally in regards to including youth in peace processes. Progress has been made on multiple levels in terms of UN resolutions, the UN Action Plan for Youth Inclusive Peace Processes, a lot of different initiatives, as you have presented before, for example, in the Western Balkans. There are multiple steering groups, community of practices. There is so much going on many different levels, including on the local level, where we see a really strong increase in youth networks and youth actors becoming active in local initiatives in conflict contexts. So, and in this YPS frameworks, we really see that conceptually, on a policy level, there has been some progress made. Also, in terms of how we see and approach peace processes, there has been a bit of rethinking in terms of if we rather see it from an entirely political power politics level, where only politicians or policymakers are discussing about the future of a certain context or conflict, or if we see it as a more holistic, if we want to call it multi-track approach in terms of different spaces in certain contexts working towards the goal of building a sustainable society from different directions. And with that being said, it has also become more accepted that youth, if there are part of this political or track one processes or not, they can still participate in track one discussions, negotiations, no matter if they themselves are track one or political actors or not. So I think those points that I just mentioned are a sign of there has been a rethinking of how we see youth. However, if we look at the global context, we really see that youth, or the youth population globally, is as big as it has never been before, and youth still continue to be unproportionally affected by conflict and war. There has been research published last year by the University of Glasgow that has analyzed peace agreements on a local, on a national, regional, and international level. And they say that between 1990 and 2022, only 12% of peace agreements mention youth in any kind of way. And from this 12%, the majority mentions youth in a very rhetoric way of just like listing them with like youth and women and other marginalized communities, not even like targeting recommendations in peace agreements specifically towards youth and how to build sustainable society with youth and for youth. So this really shows that nevertheless on this policy level that the progress has been made, there is so much more to do. If we look at the world today, if we look at conflict and wars today, wars have become more prolonged, they have become more fragmented, and there is basically no international consensus anymore. I'm not even sure if there has ever been, but I think there has been more consensus in the past than we have today in terms of what's the end point of conflict? What do we want to achieve? What is this goal and objective of principles and norms that we try to achieve when we work towards resolving and transforming conflicts? I don't want to end with such a note because now I feel like I have not lived up to the dessert metaphor, but I really think this should, if we look at the globe today, it should tell us that a lot has been done, but so much more needs to be done. The inclusivity file and the thinking behind and the approach behind inclusivity, it has become more complicated, yes, but it had also led to much more creative avenues of how we can think about inclusion and how we can think about including youth in peace processes. So I think really for me, the next years are this way of rethinking approaches of how we want to see mediation, peace processes, and creatively discover how we can unleash this immense potential of meaningfully including youth in these processes.
Absolutely. Thank you for ending on a good note. It's important. It seems like we've been trying really hard to do that with every word. I appreciate the global context first, because I think that it's a good pace to start off from this document and then the global context. And sometimes coming from the Western Balkans region, of course, as it pertains to us, we tend to always look at our history and how our neighbors are doing things and how we can increase cooperation between ourselves. But I think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned from how other regions of the world are implementing and localizing the YPS agenda within their context. And I think there's still a lot to extrapolate from their lessons. And I would like to invite Yara, who has extensive experience within the African Union, ECOSOC, and other global forums in localizing the YPS agenda. So if you could please share with us, Yara, a bit more about how things are being done in the Arab region.
Hello, everybody. So good morning or good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me for the Peace Week. And unfortunately, I couldn't make it myself, but I'm happy to meet with you all. So I'm coming with a different perspective, different regional experiences, cross-cutting experiences between African and Arab region, as I come from Egypt. I'm happy that today I'm presenting the Youth Peace and Security Program in Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building. It's known as CCCPA. It's a center of excellence to the EU and the only civic center for working on peace and security fields in the Arab region. Also, it has a lot of international presence as well. So I'd like to highlight that currently protracted conflicts has been reaching most of the regions, even the type of conflicts that are taking place. They are actually disproportionately affecting youth, women, and children. And I totally agree with the previous speaker when he was talking about what do we want, how do you want to resolve conflict, and how do you want to see peace in the world. So let me first take you, I don't want to say statistics and numbers and how many youth were there in the world and Africa and the Arab region, yet we all know that the African continent and the Arab region are mostly the youngest and the fastest growing number of youth if compared to other regions. Correct me if I'm wrong as well. And I'd like to take you first through what the center is doing in Africa and the Arab region as experience, because this is also a good chance as a platform to share this. So actually the center works on capacity building programs and training, research and policy development when it comes to peace and security, part of which is the YPS program. It also integrates a youth-centered approach across all the programs of the center. And there is an Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development. This is one of the African-led forums that amplifies voices of policymakers and features the voices of youth. Let me give you an example of an intergenerational dialogue that Aswan Forum leads, which is, for example, during the 3rd edition, it was on empowering African youth voices for a peaceful and climate resilient future. So here there is more of mainstreaming the YPS and youth into climate, peace and security. And also the 4th edition was actually on the youth role in scaling up innovative pathways and sustainable solutions through education to build peace. And I'm happy that this also aligns with one of the thematic areas of the Peace Week when talking about education and how education systems should be inclusive, responsive to youth needs, young women and young men, and it's good to highlight to consider the needs of young women. Also, on the occasion of the 4th edition of the Aswan Forum, which took place this year, last July, there is an African Youth Declaration which was released on re-envisioning global governance for peace and development, the future we want. And here it was featuring raising voices and perspectives of African youth and policymakers on the role of youth into the new multilateralism that we're seeing, the new governance that we're seeing, and across different thematic areas. I know that these are mostly regional centered when it comes to Africa and for other work, Arab region, unfortunately, they just not started, but the Arab youth strategy on, the Arab strategy on YPS was just released a couple of months ago. Yet I'm quite sure the region has been doing a lot of efforts, but hopefully in the upcoming period, there is more implementation. But coming back to the Aswan Forum, we also featured the Summit of the Future and the Pact of the Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future. And it's good to highlight that when the new agenda for peace was out, we were really happy to see youth integrated across the agenda, the new agenda, and to see youth, for example, in climate, peace, and security. Because let's agree that today we're talking about the Peace Week. So not everybody knows the differentiation and the approaches when it comes, for example, we're talking about climate, one of the things that exacerbates the suffering of young people, especially for those affected by conflict. There's a difference between climate action and when it comes to climate, peace, and security. So I was happy to see that reflected in the agenda, yet when we see the Pact for the Future, it's very minimal when it comes to talking about peace and security, like climate, peace, and security, for example. So I think we need more progress is there, yes, because I don't want to sound pessimistic, but we still need more efforts to highlight further how the impact of working on youth responsive and holistic approaches into the continuum of peace and security is important, not only into, we cannot take something from an overarching angle. We need to get more specific into how conflict and how this other matter, how, for example, preventing radicalization, combating climate implications, this all sets into peace and security. So this is one thing I wanted to also highlight. Also, as long as we are celebrating supposedly 9 years of UN Security Council resolution, next year there's a 10th, it's important to interlink the YPS agenda, and there are gaps in this. With, for example, the PBAR, the Peace Building Architecture Review, that's taking place next year, this is a good momentum to build these interlinkages, because still the youth peace and security agenda needs to well integrate with other frameworks, and not only integrate in sense of discussing it in a forum or in a dialogue, but as well to have guidance in accordance to that, guideline, training on that, how to integrate, how to mainstream. There are a lot of efforts, I'm quite sure about that, but as long as there is this momentum next year, so why not to build on that? Another thing, I'm happy that I'm bringing a different perspective, a different region. I don't want to go long, but also I hear mediation in Syria and Afghanistan. For example, I'm also a member in the African Union, African Youth Network on conflict prevention and mediation. It's called Wise Youth. It's the first cohort this year. So I would love to connect with also other experts, either in the panel or that are attending now the forum, who work on mediation, conflict prevention, and the preventive diplomacy in general, because this is how also we share experiences, especially when it comes to mediation. Now, preventive diplomacy is a key to conflict resolution, to solving conflict, especially when it comes to young women and men on the ground, when it comes to civil society organizations, when it comes to organizations that are the ones that can do this mediation better than, or let's not say it better than, let me say it politically correct. I mean, they are the ones on the ground that can respond better to the needs of their citizens. And I would like to just have a small recommendation by the end of my intervention, which is, I think it's important starting from the third week of peace, the Peace Week, to maybe have more series of cross-regional consultations or more exchanges, dialogues, because this is important. It's not only, yes, it's important to localize and make more context specificity to agendas by countries and by regions, but it's also important to see what are the best practice to be able to localize. Because as also another speaker was just saying, we need to invest in knowledge and experiences, and investing here comes also through seeing what others are doing. Thank you. I don't want to go long, and I'll be available for any further questions or interest to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yara, and thank you for bringing in this perspective. It's very important to sometimes take away key lessons from places that you might not have imagined you could learn from. So thank you for sharing that, and absolutely, I think it's important to continue to invest in these exchanges, and a big part of building peace is bringing differences together and finding similarities and finding joint collective action in very diverse contexts. So thank you for that, Yara. Now we are going to zoom out a little bit and look into some more intricate factors that can be overlooked when we're talking about the YPS agenda as something that's political or something that's very structural or administrative. There is, I think, a lot of difficulty involved in talking about this subject matter when we're talking about violence, conflict. It is impossible to talk about these things without looking into the ethics of it and the collective accountability that must be addressed. So I would kindly ask Dr. Siemer, who has a lot of experience in researching ethics and international engagement, to tell us a bit more about this ethical environment of our time and about how we can approach accountability in international engagement.
Christelle, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Thanks to Yara, Michal, and Milena for setting up this session so beautifully. What a tremendous opportunity to be here. It is my privilege. I'm grateful for the invitation. I understand that I'm now approaching the upper end of the intergenerational dialogue. So once I am invited, I do say yes. I actually do believe it is very important to keep these conversations going. You asked me, Christelle, to speak a little bit about the ethical environment of our time. And this is something that I take very seriously. And I take it so seriously because I've had this long trajectory of doing work in conflict contexts. You mentioned in the introduction that I had done conflict and peace and protection work, youth, peace and security work throughout my career, initially primarily in sub-Saharan Africa, but not only. And almost a decade ago, I can't believe that we're already at this place. I was also quite involved in the youth, peace and security agenda and some early consultations in the first year of the review, also in the lead up to it. And one of our speakers mentioned, I think it was Milena, about how this initial agenda had been within the preventing violent extremism push at the UN Security Council, and has since been taken over by young people themselves. And I find that incredibly inspiring and hope-giving. The fact that you are organizing this Peace Week in Albania, and it is a youth-led organization of a tremendous event, is so encouraging. So I really want to congratulate you for doing that. This is serious work. This is hard work in the Balkans region. It is serious. It is still as real as it is also an emergence from a difficult past. But if we look on the headlines today, this is a matter. This Peace Week is something that we must all take very seriously. I think it was Mr. Loka who talked about peace as the work that we do every day. Mr. Tina as well talked about this kind of engaged work that we do each day, and I fully support this. And it takes work. It takes a lot of work. I would like to say that I will end this on a hopeful note. And my definition of hope is of the everyday active kind. So for me, hope is a verb. Hope is a muscle that we work, and we started on small everyday actions. So we're talking here quite a bit about the localization of peace, and I think we can talk about as well the localization of hope. And so with Yaha's contributions on, in the Middle East, in Egypt right now, but across the world, how can we link up? How can we interconnect our actions on hope and on peace to indeed create a world that is full of peace, and a world that allows us to live up to the dignity and justice and all these wonderful ideals that have been enshrined in the UN conventions. And so this is something that I would like to start this conversation on ethical environment of our time. Simon Blackburn is one of the ethicists who talks about the ethical environment as sort of the beliefs that make certain events possible. What are the climate of ideas that make violence, bombing, genocide possible? Here we are in ending 2024. We have, as a global society, reached this place where we could all live in dignity and we all could live in peace. We have the resources, we have the technology. There is no reason why children in Western Congo are dying today from an unknown disease, why children in Gaza are being killed right now. This is not necessary, and these are human-created conditions. So for me, what I would like to bring to you are two concepts, and then I think we're going to go to a bit of a conversation. The concept of the global political economy of violence, right? So it's very easy to consider war and violence as something over there. Actually, it's something that is deeply interconnected. And I think all of us who are here know this. And yet somehow the international systems that have evolved, very technical, developed by very brilliant and hardworking, caring individuals, have seemed to not understand that what we do here is very connected to what is happening over there. So much of my advocacy work and teaching work now has us look at what are we doing here now. So I'm speaking to you today from Geneva. I had a long history of working in conflict zones, so the over there. But it took not too long to understand that what's happening here in Geneva or here in the places of privilege is completely connected to what is happening over there. For so many years, I was working in Eastern Congo with children who were working on the front lines of the different armed groups that were mining the coltan, cassiterite, lithium, and so violently exploiting the children and the young people and the men and the women who were just trying to make their survival. They're making their survival by doing the mining that is going to provide the batteries for the phones and the computers that here in the privileged, rich world we are benefiting from. So how do we tell stories of violence that allow people in positions of power to understand that they too are part of the conditions of violence? And this is a very hard story to tell, and this is what I'm trying to do here with my students in Geneva as we engage on what does ethical action and accountability really mean in the world today. And so the first step is to look at oneself, look at one's own actions. What of my government is supporting the construction of military industrial weapons? What are my agricultural policies doing to farmers in the Sahel? So really trying to look at peace and violence and peace as something that is deeply interconnected. Okay, so that, and we get distracted by that because there's another conference and there's another donor appeal and there's a new bombing, and so we're so busy reacting rather than responding. So that is something I would offer up to you who are already doing the leading work in peace, is to step back a little bit, to look at the interconnections, to look at the history that led to the conditions of violence, and to see how sort of the global political economy is part of that. That helps to responsibilize someone like me teaching here in Geneva, but donor governments who are providing the support, and negotiators and policymakers in the capitals that are making decisions that impact all of us. So that is one thing. And then the second thing, and this relates a little bit to, I think it was Mikhail who ended this question on transformation. So transformation of violence to peace. And this is the second concept, and it comes from Pierre Bourdieu, who is the sociologist who looks at structures and how society is the way it is, and what is the history that led to this moment, and how does that continue on to the future. And there's this concept called the law of conservation of violence. And I think this idea is very helpful because it allows us to see, and it builds on the metaphor of the law of conservation of electricity, in that electricity will continue down the path of least resistance, but so will violence. Right? So unless we see very clearly what are the conditions, the structural conditions that are leading to the continuation of violence, unless we truly understand those, we're not going to be able to put in place the systems that will help to transform them, right? This active transformation of violence requires this clear diagnosis that looks at the geopolitical, political economy, that looks at the history, but that also gives us the opportunity to imagine, I can do something in the transformation of violence. And the transformation of violence is not going to be more reports, more meetings, more appeals, but rather the hard work of truth-telling, of understanding the hard parts, and also of our own daily actions. So this brings it back to this transformation on an individual level, which I find is incredibly empowering, because me as an agent, working with my privilege, working with my skills, working with my networks, I can be part of the transformation towards something that is more like peace, that is more like dignity, that is more like justice for all people And so this is why I'm so glad to be here. I look forward to discussing more about how you are doing this in Albania, how you're doing it in the region, how Yara is doing it with all of her fellow leaders in the Middle East. There's work to do, we're doing it. If we keep working on the truth and considering the ethical environment that lets some things happen and others not, I think we have reason to be hopeful. So thank you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I really like that you pointed out the structural conditions, because if we dive into the solution without properly analyzing what it is that is maintaining the status quo, what it is that we are fighting against, what stream of factors keep in place the current conditions that don't allow this inclusion to be organic, to be natural, to come from within, as opposed to fragmented initiatives that push for it. So thank you for bringing that in. And that is actually a very good connection to what I wanted to ask next. When we talk about youth, and this is something that I think we experience here in Albania, but it is also a larger phenomena, is that we talk about youth as if, Mr. Loka mentioned this as well, as if it's a separate group, as if it's a group that exists in its own, and we must include it into something else that continues parallel to their presence. And in that way, even initiatives that mean well, that come from a good place and have good backing, sometimes end up being fragmented, as I mentioned earlier, but also end up making youth inclusion seem as a tokenist gesture, as something that's mostly cosmetic and not truly meaningful. So Mihaela, I would like to ask you how you think, and in your experience, what is useful in shifting away from this symbolic youth participation in peace processes to genuine co-creation and to meaningful engagement?
Thanks, Crystal. I will try to focus on a couple of very practical points, because to me, when we talk about inclusion and youth participation, it usually comes back to this question of how do we design inclusion? How do we design engagements and activities in order to then also be able to reach the youth or just the population groups that we actually want to reach? So from my experience on working on, especially on Syria, I think there is so much to be done in terms of mainstreaming youth across different discussions. I think sometimes we tend to stay in our YPS bubble, in our youth inclusion bubble, and we talk about inclusion and youth inclusion and youth inclusion and include youth, but we don't really talk about like what is it? What are the substantive perspective and things that should be included? What is the next step of not only have youth inclusive, but what are the perspectives and priorities that they want? What are the aspirations, wishes, visions that they have for their societies? So I think there is a lot to be done in terms of broadening this youth inclusion towards, I would wish towards a scene where it's not the question of do we have a youth group in a consultation. No, it's just normal that within consultations, within peace-building engagement, we have youth in all the engagements that we do, and youth and their voices are being included on a systematic and strategic level. So this aspect of mainstreaming youth, I think, is really important. We as Swiss Peace work on Syria with the Office of the UN Special Envoy for Syria on a civil society inclusion mechanism. And there, in order to include civil society into the Syrian peace process. And there, we experience this this balancing act between creating spaces where youth can connect and interact with each other, but at the same time also mainstreaming them across meetings, consultation, advocacy efforts. So really this balancing of on the one hand creating spaces for youth and with youth, and on the other hand mainstreaming them across activities. The second point that I would like to mention is kind of a practical, maybe also recommendation to all of us and myself as well, is to be very sensitive about the social and cultural norms that come with including youth. In our work on Afghanistan, I make a practical example first. In our work on Afghanistan, we sometimes see that if we are in discussions, in peer exchanges, where we're trying to mainstream this youth, non-youth point, we see that sometimes culturally it is the norm that older people or older women, older men speak first while youth stay silent. So how do we engage with that? How do we deal with that in practice? If we are in a meeting where in the end only the more senior or the older participants speak. So this brings me back to the point of that we are mindful and sensitive how we design engagements and activities, that we create a space, either separate or together, whatever is most conducive to the objectives and goal that we have, but that we really are mindful to take into considerations what is the cultural specificities, the context specificities that we deal with in order to make it possible for young people to actually meaningful contribute their opinions and their visions within whatever, a consultation, a peace-building engagement, an advocacy, and an advocacy meeting. And then the third point I would like to highlight is, and it goes back to something that Claudia just also mentioned of this ethical aspect. I think we really have to be sensitive in terms of the duty of care that we have when engaging with youth, especially when we talk about conflict context and peace-building efforts. I think it brings us again back to this design question of we need to be adaptable and flexible of how we create those spaces of engagement and to be flexible in order to also accommodate and customize what we do to the people we try to serve. Those would be the 3 points that I would like to mention on a more practical level.
Thank you very much, Michal, and thank you for highlighting that transitional aspect between youth as passive beneficiaries and youth as active shapers of peace. And I also like that you highlight both sides, because sometimes we tend to count one as the good one and the other one as we should move away from it, but both are interlinked in a way that I think make truly youth engagement functional. We must look at youth as both like the center of attention, but also how we are working for them. That's not something that we need to step away from, like sometimes it ends up coming in as a conclusion. Going back to something a bit more practical and more administrative, when we talk about the YPS agenda, we automatically think about the local policies, the national policies that will allow it to be incorporated and to be translated into something that's actionable. So what would you say, Milena, are some of the best strategies for implementing the YPS agenda? Are the national action plans one of them? What else would you focus on? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I'm still a bit under impression of what I was listening before from both Yara and Claudia and Michal. But to speak in practical terms, I don't think we know. Or at least I cannot offer a straightforward answer and say this is the way to go. What we do know, I mean, from policy making as such, and can take lessons learned from that, also from the 20 years of implementation of Women, Peace and Security agenda, is that just having any sort of policy in terms of be it a framework, a roadmap, national action plan, if you will, or strategy, might not be sufficient. I mean, there are preconditions to it so that it's meaningful. But in general, to unpack this first, like the implementation can take different shape and form. Okay, it can be a dedicated policy, for sure. It can be also mainstreamed into existing framework, but also it can be projects, programs, and services. Sometimes services actually is going to make a big difference in certain geographies. So I think to answer this question, we also need to have a lot of dialogue, joint reflection, debate, taking up a bottom-up approach in trying to find the answer, what works for this particular context or this geographical area, which brings me back to apart from participation as one of the horizontal principles, and I think Michal also tackled this, I think that precondition for that is also to have intersectional approach, which I know this is a quite buzzy word these days and all of that, but what does it mean at the end of the day is to ask this question, where is the power? How is the power distributed? Who are we hearing or not hearing? Whose word has some weight and whose word is silenced in a way? And then by answering that question, then we can see how certain topic or issue or problem is maybe differently impacting different people. And from that space, then we can see what is the answer in terms of measures, in terms of the format itself. I think that's the one way to go. And apart from that, I would say that one of the leading principles, so let's say a mindset that I believe it's correct to take for this kind of situations when we have a global policy that needs to be localized is in the very word localization. What does it mean? I think it means that we need to embrace decolonized approaches to that, which is not necessarily a word that we use a lot in the region of Western Balkans. You can hear it in some other regions, context, venues, but not necessarily here. However, I think it's important to operate from that place if we want to have local ownership everywhere and not to actually replicate this power dynamics that YPS agenda is trying to address, because it's about addressing violence of exclusion. It's about addressing the distribution of power, which is actually living up on hate-based discrimination and prejudices and so on and so forth. So the colonized approaches are, I think, super, super important here, especially when we think also funding and how all of this is happening. Also, we see some developments not only here, but in many other countries. Who is driving the agenda and in which way? Do we do actually a bottom-up approach where we speak to not only mainstream youth or the elite youth who speak English, who are digitally literate, who live in capital cities and who come to these sort of events and can express themselves, and maybe somebody will hear them and pick up what they have to say, but what about the others? Probably this is a slower path, maybe more costly, but at the end of the day, I think it's the only one correct that will ensure that we have a long-term impact and sustainability, and that this policy is not just, yet another, strategy and whatnot. Also, in terms of the concrete question, and you asked about the national action plans. It seems this is the way to go, this is recommended and all of that, and we saw that women, peace and security for the most part is operationalized through these sort of documents. However, what we also see and learn is that huge percentage of those documents is not budgeted. And then it's what? It's a mental exercise. If there is no budget involved in all of that. So I think this is a prerequisite, and there are conversations in terms of YPS financing taking place that you can look up. People did the homework in this sense, and they advocate for that. But apart from it, mainstreaming as an idea can also be tricky. On one side, I think it's quite necessary because there is no policy or sector in public sector which is irrelevant to young people. And by nature, YPS agenda is tackling a lot of those and interconnecting into holistic approach, etc., etc. So mainstreaming, I think it's very much needed, but also there is this risk of the entire agenda being watered down if it's only attempt to mainstream it, that we do not necessarily always monitor well or see where the money goes. And at the end of the day, we can also have this risk of just continuing the business as usual because it's so broad, because it tackles different sectors and different walks of life. We can just continue to do what we're doing and just label it, well, this is contributing to YPS, the same way that is, I don't know, contributing to Agenda 2030. You know, everything is about SDGs, right? We can find a link to it. So there is this risk that I think should be taken into consideration when we try to do implementation. And finally, what I think it matters a lot, and I want to commend Rajko for doing so, is to really gathering diverse sectors, to acknowledging, you know, public institutions are necessary. There is no public policy without public institutions, and also without youth, obviously, but sometimes we tend to stick in our own niche, you know, this is youth agenda and that's it. Public institutions matter. I think these allyships and partnerships needs to be built. I think that prerequisite for this is capacity building also, because we need internal architecture in order to have on whom to rely, even if we have some sort of document adopted anywhere, be it national, be it regional context, it can be a local municipality context as well, or your own organization, how you can do this implementation. But acknowledging the diversity of sectors that can be involved in this and have this very holistic approach, I think it's a good way to go. So maybe slowly, I mean, the implementation of women, peace and security was a little bit slower in some parts of our region, for example, or across the globe. That doesn't mean that this is necessarily bad. And when we take a look globally, there are only few national action plans being adopted and only few actually publicly available. Does it mean that nothing else is going on? Certainly not. So I think what matters is to create this on a very healthy basis and to take it from there, and the very format or the output, if you wish, that you're going to come out from is then more quality and has better chances to actually make a change in real life of real people.
Many keywords there that we need to focus on and need to pass on to whoever we collaborate with in future conversations as well. So thank you, Milena. And it seems like a very realistic approach, not watered down, as you said, and not, I think, also like trying to amplify it in a way that doesn't feel practical. So thank you for that. And you mentioned something that I would say is also closely related to this grassroots versus institutional approach. And those are two angles that are both important in moving forward anything really, but also important in the YPS context. And you also talked a bit about like this intersectorial, which I know that has been mentioned a lot, but it's important to note because in this very room we have the cooperation between international organizations, local civil society, academia, regional bodies, and we actually see that it's very important to have all of these voices and people and presences in the same room. But what is the best way to go about it? What can we expect from each of these people? What roles can each of these actors play in a way that's most conducive to our common goal? Claudia, you in your professional life have worn many hats and have worked in both international NGOs, the United Nations, and now also academia as a researcher. Could you tell us a bit more about, like, very briefly, this approach of cooperation between very different mindsets and types of organizations?
Wonderful, Christelle. Thank you so much. And if I must say, I have to be brief because I have a class that is about to start, so I'm going to have to speak and leave. But I do believe that the question you have asked is so important because connecting our forces is essential. This is the only way that we're going to do it. I think with our students here in Geneva and many students, there's a format and a model that has been sort of preached about how you become a policymaker, how you become a peacemaker, how do you get involved in working in the world. And I have learned, and perhaps I myself followed that trajectory, actually we don't need more of the same thing, right? We actually need to do things differently. We don't need more LinkedIn posts proclaiming how proud I am and how privileged I have been, even though I do feel very proud to be here and I feel very privileged to be here as well. But what we need is individuals showing up as their unique, gifted selves to do this work. So it really will take all of us. And this sort of Frantz Fanon bottom-up swell is what we need. And we're seeing it. It is happening. Maybe it's happening in Syria right now. Maybe it's happening in Cairo. Maybe it's happening in Geneva right down the street here. Maybe it's happening in the finance board meeting where something is shifting and that takes that just one person to realize, okay, maybe I have enough profit. Actually, maybe I could use my power and all my resources to create some kind of potential positive shift in the world. So this linking between different sectors, different professions, not speaking always to the same people is crucial. What we end up doing, and I think probably Michal understands, when we're in a space, we end up getting in an echo chamber. We talk to the same kinds of people who all believe in the same thing, and probably that's the truth for all of us who are here, who have come here together. Can we go beyond? Can we get uncomfortable? Can we get, and this is especially for someone like me who is just sitting in so much privilege, can I get uncomfortable by going and understanding what hunger means like, even in a place like Geneva today? Can I put myself in a risk, in a discomfort so that I will actually be able to start seeing the person on the other side, whatever that other side is, whatever label it is. I think that is what we need to do now. We have the technical information, we have the willpower, we have the brilliant minds of everyone who is on this call in this room today. So how can we start doing things a little bit differently? And that will require getting uncomfortable. It will require knowing how to hold the paradox better. Again, we feel comfortable when we're with each other, but can we suspend judgment? And this is not for everybody, okay? This is for people who are in this room and who are on this call. Can we hold the space so that we can remember the humanity of the enemy, the other? Can we go beyond the labels? Can we go to that deeper level of what makes us the same rather than what makes us different? But to be able to do that, to be able to sort of traverse those vast divides that history and politics and culture and society and media have told us that we are separate, can we rather push back against that and say, actually, no, I disagree. Actually, I think we're more the same. And so going to that sameness, right? No matter who it is, which other political person is on your side, that takes work, that takes practice, and that takes the space of self-knowing to be able to hold that. It's very hard because, again, we're so busy, we're so reactive that we're not taking the space just to be still and to connect back into that wisdom that knows that we could do things differently, that humanity is actually the same as my humanity. Or even if we talk about that life being, whatever it is, because we're talking about climate and environmental catastrophe, well, could we not connect in to that too? And to see how much of it that connects us. So that takes a lot of personal work, right? So for all of us who have committed our lives, I think everyone here probably is committing their life to the endeavor of peace. Can we do that holding quiet space, listening, okay, and what do I know? And then trusting that this wisdom, I know what it would take to move towards peace. And so this is what I'm trying to do in the spaces where I can. So encouraging my students to stop, maybe not stop, but to pause, to stop the frenetic. It's only going to get worse. So it's going to take a lot of work just to pause and to be quiet. And in that quiet, we can start making those connections across the different institutions, across those different spaces, across the battle lines as well, to actually get to this question of peace that we're all working so hard for, perhaps even sacrificing our lives and our loved ones for. So if I can end my contribution to this wonderful session on those words, please know that we can stay in touch. I think, Kristen, you'll be able to share my contact information. This is important work. It is long-term work as well. And sometimes we're going to need to come in to support each other, to remind each other, to hold each other, to advocate for each other, to speak on each other's behalf when perhaps one of us cannot. So you can count on me to be with you as you continue forth and as you have your Peace Week in the coming days, but beyond as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for sharing your very mindful words and for making the time to be with us, to join us. I am very glad that this approach is being passed on to younger generations directly, to your students, and thank you for sharing that perspective and that approach with us as well. I know that we have to be mindful of everyone's time because we're a little bit behind schedule, so I will only ask you one last question, a very brief one, and then we can allow for some space for questions and answers from the audience as well. The theme of this Peace Week is the future of youth peace and security in the Western Balkans, but also beyond, because we're so interconnected that it's impossible to look at one thing without considering what's happening on the other side of the world. I would like to ask each one of you to maybe share a few words about what you think are the strategies for the future. What are the next steps and how do we get there? You can start however you like. Maybe Milena first.
Okay. Strategies for the future. It's again a big title to refer to, but to keep it brief, I think that many steps are being made, and I mean the very fact that we sit here today and discuss this and have space to do so and support to do so, and that you do Peace Week for the third time in a row, I think that's a good sign. But in terms, if we speak about the implementation itself, as I said, I think that certain principles needs to be applied from the get-go, which will somehow make irrelevant then what is the exact format. But if you apply intersectionality, if you strive to have meaningful participation, if you follow decolonized approaches, if you invest in capacity building, in partnerships, in this intergenerational cooperation, I think that's a good way to go, and this is what we should be advocating and promoting. And at the end of the day, I think the entire narrative where we are now enabling special space for youth is limiting. I think that we also, if we acknowledge, if we think from the place that young women and men and non-binary youth are also sometimes actually bringing to the space, bringing to conversation, bringing to the streets, if you will, also opinions of others. So it's not always about the special youth interest that we need to bring to the table because it's invisible. I mean, somebody said before, young people, they do not live in vacuum separated from, their families, the rest of the citizenship, and everything that we see and live. But sometimes they are simply, for various reasons, better able to voice out that. And I think that in their voices, we can see reflections of other parts of society. So I think that's additional value for the YPS agenda to take higher priority in all of our societies. With that being said, I think that in terms of implementation, co-management is definitely something to explore as a way to go. We saw an example of that being done in Netherlands in implementation of the women, peace and security agenda, and perhaps something like that could be explored here. And as I also said, in order for this to be really transformative, we need to stop doing business as usual. So, and maybe policy making as usual, and try to really go more bottom up. And I think this is the quality, you know, of representative democracies at the end of the day.
Thank you, Milena. Yara, could you share with us how you see the future of youth in multilateralism as well?
Thank you very much. It's such an important question. I think youth need to building their capacities, investing in their education around the current conflicts and its nature, the cycles of conflict, and how best, to scale up their innovative solutions. And I know innovative sometimes it's misused by many people, but the thing is, youth are youth, women and children, and let's agree that all groups in vulnerable situations need to be part of the designing, the implementation of all frameworks that address various cycles of conflict. I think capacity building is a key. The second thing is, as it was mentioned about their meaningful participation, there should be a how of how to reflect, how to build trust too between the youth and donors now. Even international organizations, humanitarian organizations, they're all affected by what's happening in the globe. So I believe that there should be a way of language communication between the what's happening on the ground, people who are affected on the ground, and where the priority of funding opportunities and resources are being invested in. One last point I'd like to talk about is now there's a debate, and maybe you agree with me or not, but it's not only about democracy anymore, but it's also about smart governance or good governance. How the architecture, how the peace architecture, how the governance architecture, how and here I'm differs from a region to another and from entity to another. Yet the architecture itself, we see that there's already reformation or revisiting these architectures to how the world is shaped now. So I believe that multilateralism is important that youth understand about governance, the architectures where they come from, being more context specific, and context specific here not only about their country, because sometimes we focus also on localizing while excluding ourselves from the region. And now I see, this is the last thing I would like to say, that there is spillover of conflicts on other countries. So not necessarily like Egypt is a peaceful country, but still you're affected by what's happening around Egypt. For example, you have highest displaced people, among which are young women and men and children. So this is also reshaping your national policies and how you're dealing with displaced people, and also reshaping the globe and talking about different other countries. So I think, multilateralism for me, governance is a key, and how we deal with it and how youth are playing a role in it. That's a key. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Yara. Nihal, you get the floor again, and you're going to get to be the real dessert now, because it's the closing.
Thanks. I will be very brief because I think we touched on many different aspects that also feed into this vision of strategies for the future. What I would wish for is that we continue and that we are creative in the way we create those spaces of participation for young people, and that we, as you mentioned before, Milena, really become aware of this diversity of youth as a group, or in their multifaceted ways of being, and to go beyond this easy, accessible circle of youth that are very palatable to speak in certain spaces, who can participate in certain spaces. So I would wish that there are more creative ways of reaching those beyond these like easy, accessible circles. And with that being said, I also think there is a need to push for a flexible funding and budgeting, because this is an extra mile to go. This is reaching the not easy to reach is an extra mile, it's an extra effort. And I would wish that within our funding and within our budgets, it is possible to go this extra mile and to invest more in order to make the inclusion of youth more representative. And now that we shared and talked in this space with all of you, I also think there is much more to learn from each other, to connect with each other. Yara mentioned it in the beginning of these exchanges between different contexts and exchanging lessons learned. I think in each context there have been so many experiences, so much richness of expertise on how youth have been included in certain contexts. I think there is a lot to be done in terms of learning from each other and learning what worked and what also didn't work in terms of youth inclusion.
It's a beautiful note to end on, and I'm going to add only one more thing. We call this day Participation Day because of one of the pillars of the YPS agenda, and we talk about participation as youth participating in peace-building processes and in decision-making processes, in policy-making, but we also must participate and participate in these discussions, participate in thinking processes, participate in the work, in the initiatives, before we try to find the best ways to get youth to be part of it. We must also be part of it. So thank you for highlighting that and highlighting the need to continue having these conversations, whether it's on a big panel, a Peace Week event, RICO Academy, or also amongst each other, amongst ourselves, in our offices, in our families as well. So thank you all for being here, for being attentive, and now we can have a few minutes to answer some questions before we let the girls go and catch their flight. The question was not plugged in, by the way. He's actually...
No, thank you very much for it was a very illuminating discussion, which I enjoyed very much. My question is related a bit with the relation between the WPS and the YPS agenda. So in my experience, there have been very few initiatives that have successfully managed to bridge the two agendas, and sometimes it might feel like focusing on the WPS agenda may water down the YPS agenda. So what would be your suggestions on how to work together with both agendas without and have the optimal results on both ends?
Yes, wonderful question. Thank you so much. I think we will be seeing a lot of work on this topic coming out in years to come. And already I think a lot of conversations are taking place on this very question. I think by taking a look at the content of both, we see a lot of similarities. I mean, for starters, they share the first three pillars, the three P's on participation, prevention, and protection, right? They also share this logic in a sense of challenging dichotomies which exist in relation to women, or in this case of youth. And what I think it's important here is to especially take care to, in whichever way we think about implementation or localization of these policies, to acknowledge the young women, because they are being summed under women or summed under youth somehow. And then within that, not to stop there, I mean, not to invite for identity politics, but rather for intersectionality, to really ask and wonder, are all of our lives really the same? Regardless of where we live or what is our sexual orientation or ethnicity or level of education or different other experiences. So I think both of them can be serving to lift up this group or groups which are being invisible. But I think you're right that there is a certain fear from the practitioners working on one end or the other that one of them having more spotlight is going to take away the money from the other. So I think we need to find a way to integrate both, because I say they're so similar in terms of the big ideas, in terms of the values that they promote, that they are not excluding one another. They should be reinforcing. So I think it's just a matter of practice and from which position you're asking this. Are you in civil society organization? Are you intergovernmental organization? Do you sit in some UN office, and where exactly? In order to find ways and make this mutually reinforcing in practice, and then through everyday activities that we have. I mean, we do see through the Peace Building Fund, Youth and Gender Promotion Initiative, right, which is basically supporting both of these agendas. But truth to be told, I think it is very smart to look at simply its longer implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Much more experience we can pick up from globally. There are more than 90 or 100 national action plans over there. There is also a lot of knowledge production in terms of gender equality, in terms of feminism, in terms of inclusion and intersectionalities. At the end of the day, feminist principle. So I think we can just make benefit from looking at that, and then explore from our own position how to make this really work, and how to create synergy, because those two policies are supposed to strengthen each other and not to be like, I don't know, frenemies, competing frenemies, yes.
Any other questions? It's that moment when you feel like you see the thoughts clouding, but nothing coming out. Well, if there are no other questions, I know that Milena has a flight to catch, and many of you probably other engagements. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here, and we hope to see you in our other panel in the afternoon, tomorrow as well, at some meetings, which is, we're going to talk about education, the role of education in peace activism. And then on Thursday, I guess, on the 12th, we have an online panel on technology and AI and how digitalization can be an ally in peace building. So please do join us, do spread the word, and we hope to see you again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yara, if you are still with us. Thanks a lot for joining in.